Our speaker this morning is Julianne Miles. Julianne has been a member of us for a couple of years now, I think, and I think most of you know her. She's been very active in the community in all kinds of service areas. She's also a veteran, and we appreciate your service. And she's going to be speaking this morning on deep listening.
Good morning. So this talk that I'm going to give about deep listening, these are not my words. I used a packet that Kathy shared with me of a bunch of different sermons and articles. And also, I feel very much that I'm preaching to the choir because a lot of this is psychology, and so many of you have mental health backgrounds. So you already know a lot of this. So I want to first give credit to the pieces that I pulled from, which was an article about the heart and science of attachment by Jesse Stern, PhD, and Rachel Sampson. Rose Latham, who is a small business coach, who talks about active listening versus deep listening. Listening for Change, which was a sermon by Reverend Joe Cleveland of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Saratoga Springs, New York. And Bella Wren and Rebecca Schomburg from the Society for Personality and Social Psychology. So listening. Listening has the quality of the wizard's alchemy. It has the power to melt armor and produce beauty in the midst of hatred. As I begin my talk today, I want you to take a moment and think of someone in your life, from any point in your life, that really got you. You know, they understood you and you felt safe talking to them. Take a minute and try to think of somebody like that. When I was a child, I told my mother all manner of things. What I thought about the color green, the dream I had about the big volcano, my most outlandish ideas, including the plan to build a hot air balloon with my best friend and circumnavigate the globe together. Often, when something was important to me, even if ridiculous from an adult perspective, she would pause whatever she was doing. We'd sit on the kitchen stool, and she would listen to what I had to say. Her presence was full and felt, notable in what was absent. She didn't interrupt, correct, lecture, or give advice. She allowed long silences while I gathered myself. Occasionally, she took notes and gave them to me in case I wanted to think back on things afterwards. Sometimes she asked questions or reflected back something I said, but mostly she listened. As an adult, I recognize my mother's quiet attention for what it was, a gift. It gave me a lasting capacity to trust others and to feel confident in my own voice. It also nourished a thirst to hear others' views, a curiosity about their stories. If I had a name for what it was she was doing, I would call it deep listening. Deep listening goes by many names in many cultures, including contemplative spiritual traditions and indigenous cultures around the world. In Aboriginal Australia communities, deep listening is sometimes called dadiri. Dr. Miriam Rose Umgarmer Bauman, an Aboriginal writer and elder, explained, dadiri is inner, deep listening and quiet, still awareness. It is something like what you call contemplation. According to Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, deep listening is the kind of listening that can help relieve the suffering of another person. You can call it compassionate listening. You listen with only one purpose, to help him or her empty his heart. Even if he says things that are full of wrong perceptions, full of bitterness, you are still capable of continuing to listen with compassion, because you know that listening like that, you give that person a chance to suffer less. Central to these ways of defining deep listening is a sense of presence, inner stillness, openness, and a mindful attention to what the other communicates in their body, speech, and silence. And what is its value? Well, deep listening nourishes the recipient, the listener, and the relationship. In Western therapeutic practice, holding space for a client to share their stories and struggles. Give voice to things that may have been silenced, and explore difficult emotions, and it can be transformative, a catalyst for healing and growth. In the context of a parent-child relationship, deep listening is a central component of mindful parenting because of its role in identifying and responding sensitively to children's needs. Decades of evidence show that attuned, sensitive, and emotionally available caregiving promotes children's healthy development, secure attachments, and mental health. We have only to recall the last time we felt truly listened to in order to conjure that same sense of worthiness. Wow, my voice matters. I am someone worth listening to. But deep listening is not just a gift for the recipient. It is also a boon for the listener. Evidence from research with married couples demonstrates that when there is an absence of loving speech and responsive listening, when couples engage in criticism, contempt, stonewalling, and defensiveness, they're more likely to divorce. Deep listening, then, is an investment in our relationships and understanding other people. We stand to learn so much about our children, partners, ancestors, community members, and those that we perceive as other. But deep listening, it doesn't come naturally to all of us. It may even seem counterintuitive in our culture of quick fixes and endless scrolling for fast advice. It also goes back to our upbringing. If the parent doesn't have time to just sit there and share with the child, they lose that element in the family, and they lose that element in the child's upbringing. Thus, for those of us who were not listened to as children or who otherwise struggle to be present, this type of listening, it takes practice. So you may have heard of active listening. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the difference is there. I've always been told that I'm a good listener. Perhaps you are too. Working as a teacher, I trained multiple times in active listening, and you've probably been to a few such courses yourself. Active listening skills often include ideas like pay attention, withhold judgment, request clarification, show empathy, use open body language, summarize, reflect, notice emotions. I prided myself on being a great listener. I could tune in and ramp up my listening at will. I believed people felt heard. But what I noticed was active listening can be a very noisy experience. Not only do you listen to others, but there's also this noise of your own thinking to attend to, the endless chatter, opinions, and thinking. Active listening is, well, active. For the listener, much of the activity lies within the listener, more specifically in the thinking mind and the thoughts that the listener experiences. The thinking noise is happening all the time. So you have to really pay attention and notice it as it happens live in your brain. As you process what you hear, your thinking often appears as an opinion. Do I agree or disagree with them? Are they right or wrong about this? What's the problem and the solution here? What's my opinion? And then you wait, bursting to share your opinion. So are you really listening, or are you working out what to say? Are you listening to someone, or are you listening to your thinking about someone? So active listening keeps a lot of the energy and focus on you as the listener, your opinion, your contribution, and your judgment of the speaker. Your experience of yourself gets in the way of listening to the other person. There is little wizard's alchemy there, limited connection. It's all about getting to an often predetermined outcome. Where's the creativity and where's the magic? I see this clearly when I look back on teaching. As useful as active listening can be, it remains a set of tools to guide people to do what I think they should do next or what they should be doing now. It's still me and my influence on their life, because that's how many of us think a leader should listen and behave, us knowing more or better in some way. Am I really seeing and experiencing people genuinely listening, while in my mind the focus is on me and how I am perceiving it? So the more I explored deep listening, the more I realized I was not listening to other people at all. And you really can't switch off your thoughts. But you can shift your relationship to those thoughts and choose to notice them and not buy into or engage with them. Allow them to appear and then gently drift off. You can put your whole focus on the person in front of you. You can connect with who is speaking with deeper listening by listening with your whole body. The outcome is that the people can feel seen and heard like never before. There's great leadership, and that's where the magic and the power of listening lies. In fact, deep listening is actually not that hard. In fact, the more that you relax into listening to how someone is speaking and what they are saying, the more your thinking quietly drops away. So here's some tips for how to do this. First is anchor into your own body. I use my feet. I notice the connection to the ground, the temperature and textures that I feel. And as someone speaks, I notice the sensations in my own body. This helps me move away from my thinking enormously and truly listen. It becomes a visceral experience. Second thing is to listen to understand rather than fix or advise how someone else is experiencing the world. Shifting from me to you is a powerful dynamic that opens up the connection between two people. Number 3, notice your thinking as others are speaking. Hold your tongue behind your teeth to remind you not to speak. And pause for a few seconds before replying. Often the person has not finished speaking. Give them space. Experiment and test, not offering an opinion, and simply listening. See how others respond and what you now hear. At first, it can feel a bit strange. Your mind might rebel with a load of thinking. Like any skill, it takes some practice. The 4th tip is to make time. Deep listening requires our time. It may be helpful to build a regular and intentional time into your schedule to truly be present for the people that you love. It could be a once a week check-in with your partner to discuss whatever's on their mind or in their heart. For parents, it could be a walk or a drive home from school or meal times, maybe a good opportunity to check in with your child and simply be present for whatever comes up. Build a routine that works for you, but the important thing is that you make time. Another thing is to minimize distractions. Put down your phone. Many of us become master multitaskers, splitting our attention between multiple tasks and flicking between tabs on a screen. Deep listening can't be just another tab. It requires our full mind and heart to show up. Even young children, even my cat, can tell when I'm not paying attention. And you don't have to sit still in perfect stillness to listen deeply. Many of my favorite listening moments have transpired on walks with loved ones. But limiting distractions can help create the conditions for our minds to settle and be fully present. And this last tip is to notice the urge to move away, to interrupt, to fix, to distract, and choose to come back. Mindful listening is about paying attention and noticing. And this includes noticing when tension, anxiety, or distraction arise. Often these signal a desire to move away from being with the person or towards doing something. For example, interrupting or changing the topic or trying to fix the problem. When this tendency arises, simply notice it, name it silently, and let it go. Be gentle with yourself. Many people don't experience deep listening in their childhood, and they enter adulthood with a limited capacity for listening to and being with others' emotions. We tend to fall back on the communication styles and habits that we experienced in our family of origin, even if these are unhelpful in our adult relationships. Notice when these old tendencies are present and appreciate that it takes time to learn to communicate differently. Thankfully, deep listening does not require perfection. It requires awareness and a willingness to practice coming back home to those we love again and again. Now, listening to friends and family can certainly deepen your connection, but not all the listening that we do is easy. We are always being challenged to listen to something unfamiliar, perhaps discordant. Depending on the kinds of privilege we have or don't have, it's easier or harder to keep from having to listen to things that we don't want to. We don't have to listen to everything. There are boundaries and choices to make about what and who we listen to. But to really listening, some of that listening needs to be challenging. There are challenging voices that need to be heard, and we need to challenge ourselves to listen. Since I am white, I try to challenge myself to listen to voices of people who aren't white. I learned about a songwriter named Kashana Armstrong, who's based in Nashville. She has an album out called Listen. The title track, as you heard just a little while ago, asks again and again the question, why don't you listen? I like Kashana's work. She's focused on justice and healing the hurt. She has a gorgeous voice. But I confess that one of the things I thought when I first heard this song, that it was maybe a little longer than it needed to be. Talked to Chris about that. And then I realized that I was implicated by this song. Why don't you listen? That's a question directed at me, demanding me to interrogate the boundaries of my willingness to listen. James H. Cone published a book 50 years ago called Black Theology and Black Power. He wrote it in the context of the 12th Street riots in Detroit and the Black Power movement. Theologians of the time were not listening to the Black Power movement. It wasn't just the violence of the riot that was making things difficult for white America. It was the pointedness of the critique that was being leveled at society and its institutions. White supremacy is foundational to the American project and is woven through and supported by its institutions, its government, and its churches. Cone said, the time has come for white Americans to be silent and listen to black people. Now, I think of life as change, growth, evolution. But 50 years later, it sounds like Cone's book was written for today, for right now. The Black Power movement of the 60s and 70s wouldn't play by the rules of white supremacy culture. It wouldn't calm down and sit down and have a simple chat with the white powers that be. Just a few years ago, in the city of Saratoga Springs, the city leaders were annoyed that a black-led group called All of Us wouldn't come and sit down and have a conversation with city officials or the police. And so, if any protest tried to block the streets and intersections, the new policy of the city was to arrest them immediately. Black voices are struggling to be heard in Saratoga Springs. All of Us published a list of 13 demands regarding policing in Saratoga Springs and other capital region cities and counties. The demands included such things as abolition of no-knock warrants and chokeholds, prosecution of law enforcement and corrections officers for violations of the civil rights of people of color, marginalized individuals, and all people. Lots of these 13 things could be done with simple policy changes, but none of these actions are being taken. And so, is it any wonder that All of Us and its leaders keep asking as loudly as they can, why don't you listen? I have one more piece of practical advice for you before I give you your homework assignment. Psychologists have known for ages that people tend to ascribe all sorts of positive qualities to people that they like. They call it the halo effect. So perhaps it's just that people like listeners who agree with them more than people who do not. So they assume that listeners who agree with them are good listeners, and among a host of other positive traits. A second, more important reason for why this happens is that people assume that they have an objective view of the world around them. They believe they see the world the way it is. We all do. Therefore, people assume that if they share their position on an issue with others, their audience will agree with them, as long as they are also unbiased and objective. And if they disagree, it seems that they must not have listened. If they had listened, they would see the issue the same way. In line with that, they found that speakers believed that a listener who agreed with them processed information more objectively than a listener who did not. And when uninvolved observers witness these conversations, They were less inclined to see agreement as a clear sign of good listening. There is a straightforward solution to this for both speakers and listeners to acknowledge that they can mistakenly equate disagreement with poor listening. If someone accuses you of not listening, point out that you are listening. You are just not agreeing. And if you feel that someone is not listening to you, first ask yourself, are they really not listening? Or are they just not agreeing with me? So this week I challenge you to practice deep listening. Use some of the strategies, but also don't hesitate to point out that last bit, that just because you don't agree doesn't mean you aren't listening. Remember, the goal of deep listening is to make space for the other person to do the talking and to be truly heard.